Alright, so here we are with the project we created in the last video with that piano track. What I'm going to teach you in this brief tutorial is how to bring in the Apple loops, the pre-made loops that Apple use that can form the basis of your earlier compositions before you gain the confidence to try your own. So this is the kind of screen you'd be presented with. Let me close this up as well. This is the default screen. So in order to drag Apple loops into this timeline, we need to be able to access them. And so this seeing eye down here, this is the browser loop window browser. So I'm going to click on the button for the eye, and what pops up is a button pressing frenzy. So Apple loops, when they're created, have metadata attached to them, which means information not just about the tempo and the key, but what kind of sound they are. So let's bring in a beat, or at least audition a beat, and you'll see that the list gets populated by everything that was listed as a beat. And then let's take a look at acoustic beats rather than electric beats. So these ones are like to be a bit more relaxed. And then finally, let's make sure it's a grooving beat. Okay, so according to the way these were created, we now have a list of Apple loops that are beats, that are acoustic, are grooving. Now, one thing you'll probably notice is that some are green and some are blue. And the reason for that is there are two types of Apple loop. The green ones are ones that are not pre-recorded. They're simply made up of programmings of ones and zeros. Someone's played in a keyboard that drum loop, and then we have a software instrument inside GarageBand that's playing back those key presses on a keyboard, and you'll see what that looks like in a moment. The blue ones are real audio. They've been recorded with a microphone or a tape machine or something, so they might be real drums or a recording of someone who's made a beat. The difference between them we'll learn a bit more about in a moment, but that's the main difference between them. Green ones we can manipulate later. The blue ones, real audio. Once we bring them in, that's pretty much they are what they are. The next column you see here is tempo. This is the original tempo a loop is recorded at, and you'll see our master tempo here that we created by default is 120 BPM. So some of these were recorded at a slower tempo or rate or pace. Some were recorded at a faster rate or pace. When we bring in beats, they seem to map pretty well, even if we do change them from their original tempo. However, when we start bringing melodic instruments like pianos or guitars and things like that, the more we move their tempo away from the original tempo, we can get this kind of weird effect. But we don't need to worry about that too much with beats. Obviously, because beats aren't melodic, there is no key. If this was a piano, it might say C or D or E or F. The next column is how long they are in terms of beats. So there are 4 measures to a bar in a 4-bar beat. Remember, we set this up as 4/4, so that's going to go 1 2 3 4 2 2 3 4, and that's our 8 beats. This one is double that length at 16. Some are 32, some are even longer. And the final column is if we audition a beat. Say I click this once. Okay, I'm listening to the lockstep beat. It's not what I want right now. I'll click it again to stop its audition. That's not going to become a favorite of mine. I'm going to try a drum and bass bang beat. Yeah, I like that beat. That's a good groove. Now that wasn't playing back at 160 beats per minute. It was playing back at the tempo we set here, 120, and that works for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a favorite, and we'll see why in a moment, but I'm also going to drag it in. And the key to dragging loops in is you keep your mouse clicked down, you drag it in, and then you drag it in beneath the last created track. So we don't want it on the grand piano track, we want it on a free new space underneath, and then I let go. Alright, and that's our beat. And let's bring in a MIDI or a note-based, the green loops. I'll try listening to this viscous beat right here. Yeah, that might work well. So let me click that again, stop the audition, and I'm going to drag that in. You can see what a green loop looks like. And so we'll drag that. I'm going to place that here. And when this populates, you will see that these two look very different. I'm going to click this in the middle and drag along. If I double click this loop, it's going to open up down here and we can see what the audio looks like. You might have seen a 2-track stereo audio file like that before if you've ever edited audio. This is simply called a WAV file. It's the audio recording seen visually. If I now double click on the green Apple loop, you will notice, if I drag down, it is simply notes played in on a keyboard. And when MIDI, which is a protocol that was set up in the 1980s, was first set up, it was determined that if you hit this note, it would be a kick drum. If you hit this note, it would be a kick drum. If you hit this note, it's going to be some kind of snare. If you hit this note, it's going to be some kind of snare. They're mapped consistently. So we could probably go in and change this from a certain kind of kit to another kit. It would still map back a kick drum, a snare drum, and hi-hats, but they'd sound different. So that's the beauty of these green MIDI Apple loops, is you can change the sound of the drum groove afterwards. The pattern or style of the playing will stay the same, but the tonal quality, the actual sound of the drums themselves will change. With this one, it is what it is. It's how it was recorded. That's the loop we're using. Now before we finish off, let me show you how to loop this loop so it matches up with this one. In the bottom right hand corner, we simply would drag, and it's going to open up the length of that drum beat from 2 measures to 4 measures. We don't want that, so let me click the mouse and drag back. What we want to do is loop it. So we go up to the top corner, and where you see that circled arrow, we then click and hold the mouse and we drag out, and it's now looped that beat. So let's see how these two sound together. Yep, they're working for me. So, quick review. We learned how to drag in both blue and green Apple loops. We now know that the blue ones are real audio. We know that the green ones are made up of what's known as MIDI information. They've been played in by someone on a keyboard, and we can manipulate these a little bit more than these blue ones once we brought them into the timeline. We've also figured out how we can set a favorite, having auditioned our loops. And if I go back and reset this area here, once I click on favorites, these are 3 favorites I've set up. The advantage to this is you can come back once you've been auditioning loops and decide, even if a loop wasn't right for a certain project, you can have it archived and listed as a favorite, and then that way when you're researching for it when you start your next project, it's there here in this shortened loop of ones you've already chosen that you might use again. And that's Apple Loops.